Let's try a new project here for kids. We'll call this name tags and keychains. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and draw out what my block area might be. And this seems to be about a good size, if you will, for a name tag. I've created some here, and we can go ahead and modify. And if you were looking at keychains, you could make something bigger. We'll talk about milling this out. But let's start with the probability that someone has left, or maternity leave, paternity leave, and we need to create new name tags for teachers. And granted, you can get online these magnetic clips that will adhere to the back of these. So this makes a real simple and easy project. One of the things that we'll have to keep track of is our center, just to make sure that our measurements are good. So I've got roughly 60 millimeters, and I'll run it at 30 millimeters here at the center. You can go 65, whatever it might be that you want for these name tags. The other thing to consider is your text. How wide is it going to be? And so we're going to look at some of those elements. We're going to go to the engrave, if you will. But we need to note that you shouldn't be facing these. You may be staining them in order to create a contrast like we did here, as well as I'll show you some even higher end laminations that we can do to create some really popping name tags. That's why I said contrast in terms of the finish. We need to have these cut to length at the very beginning. It just seems to make it a little bit easier. And then I'll show you how to do a low profile clamp. And then we're going to go to PathPilot. We're going to go to the engraving and realize that this will only engrave on the long axis, or the x-axis, as we go across. So what do we need? I'm going to use tool 33. It happens to be a V point, 90 degree. So a very fine point. We're going to spin this at about 10,000 RPM. We're going to go about 300 millimeters per minute. We'll take a zero clearance of 15 mils. It doesn't have to be that high, but you can just do that. The height. This is the height of your text. So right now I've got it at 7.5 or 8 millimeters. However, what I need for you to be aware of is that when we go into the preview screen, we need to check the overall width. And if it doesn't fit in your 60 to 65 or 70 millimeters, then we need to change the height because it works in a ratio. I like to align to the center, but that's just me. And we'll go through and we'll set up how this aligns on the base. Okay, so here's my first example of the work that we've done with engraving. And we're doing this pretty solid from conversational here in PathPilot. Even look at that apostrophe. So I got a really fine point. That's looking really good. The deeper you run it, though, it tends to take away from that. So you can see how the T has just a little bit in there. We're probably going to do something just totally flat or run it a little bit deeper. The reason I say that is I've taken some scrap wood. Again, I've got some very thin maple here. And then I went and got a veneer kit. And so there's different types of veneer woods, very, very thin. Also splinters very easily because it's so thin. Again, all I did was just do a light glue on that, put that on there, and then compress them. And now I've trimmed them, and I've got something like this. And the reason I talk about the splinter, you can see where the miter saw just did a little bit of that. And I've got an idea for a solution because I'm worried that the end mill could potentially do the same thing. So this is my good one that I'm going to hold on to. This one I'm going to make for myself, but I'm going to do practice on this one. But one of the things that I think I might do is I'm going to take just a little CA glue, and I'm just going to coat this. Now this is a medium. You could use a thin, however you want to go about that. I'm going to take just a sticky, because I really don't want to glue my fingers together, quite honestly. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to use this kind of as a paintbrush to push down into the material, and then I will just let that set. And I'm doing kind of the medium here in the middle because that'll be, if you will, the harder area that we're milling with our end mill. And so that'll get it nice and set. And then I'm going to come back and use the thin on the edge. But I'm going to use my paper as a little block. I'm going to barely hold that in with my fingers. Just run that down there. Same thing through here. Just along the edge. And this actually creates a sealant coat. Whoops. I did glue my finger together with it a little bit. I'll pull that off. Oh, I got that good. Okay. And we'll just let that set for a little bit. And cool thing, I can sand that down if I don't like the finish on it. So that shouldn't be a problem at all. So we're going to let that dry just a little bit. I could use the accelerator, but usually the accelerator makes it bubble, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to let that set. I'm going to do the same thing with this one here. And then we're going to take it and we're going to mill these here in just a little bit. What I might do is run my practice one on this, just to make sure that all my fonts are the way I want it and my depth. And I'm not sure I'm going to run this 90-degree V. I need to go a little bit deeper in terms of that thickness. So we're going to run some trial runs on this, a little bit on this here, and hopefully this will be our final one. So this is what I've gone through and updated using the same file, just changed names and then created it as a separate file, doing a save as. And here we are just with the stained. And each time from the first one, I think I've run this 3 times or 3 processes. Each process, if I can get my measurements correct, I have dropped it at 0.050 or 50 thousandths of a millimeter. All right, so each time dropping it down just a little bit. You can still see I've got a little bit of that center ridge, which is kind of cool, but it has taken everything and made it so that it's a high contrast. Now, because of the other one having a veneer on it, I think I will have to go a little bit deeper. I'm going to start losing some of my details if I go too much deeper than what I've already done. So I think I'm going to change fonts and try something different for the laminated veneers. So I've been playing around with this just a little bit. So let's go into our conversational. With our conversational, here's what we've got. We still have our standard G54. As I said, we're going to use tool 33. We're just going to go about 10,000 RPM. You don't really have to spin it fast, but you can. We're going to go a feed rate of 300 millimeters per minute, and then 15 millimeters in terms of Z clearance. That should all be just fine. Your fonts, you're going to have to go through and play which one you want to work with because it will change the dynamics in here. What I mean by that is if I start selecting, notice how there's very little gap in between the first word and the second word. You may want to go through and play with this, and some of the things that I do to manipulate is I add more spaces in. But again, this is something that you can just kind of play with, and the text feature is, or the engraving feature is pretty basic. It's not necessarily super fancy, but it is definitely something that kids can do, and it'll work just fine. I'm going to go with a thinner line just because of the fine point that I've got. And if I change this to 8 millimeters, because that's what I'd really like. I mean, when we look at our depth here, this is roughly 25 millimeters tall. All right. Sometimes my 3/4 wood, if I'm cutting it off, that'll be roughly 19 or 20 millimeters in width. So if we start thinking about that, 8 millimeters, okay, well, that seems to be very doable in that. I also have it set up that I'm going to, on the X base, I'm going to go to the center. So that'll be 30 millimeters based off of the 60 overall. I'm going to go to a depth of 0.075 millimeters, which is just barely scratching it just to kind of see where we're at. And then obviously I want to be 7 millimeters up from the base. So let's go ahead and post this. And I'm just going to go ahead and click save. Yes, I'm going to overwrite because this is something that I've been working on. Now, here's where I want to bring your attention to, will this work or not? I can see here that my X is 113 millimeters. Well, I know that my actual name tag is only 60 mils, so that's not going to work with the 8 millimeter height. So this works in a ratio that I need to figure out, can I get this down to less than 60 millimeters? Let's go back in to File. I'm going to Conversational Edit, and I'm going to go ahead and select teacher's name, and we're going to go ahead and edit. I'm going to come up here to this. I just have been playing around, so I know that I need to be 4 millimeters or less in height. So I'm going to go ahead and click my enters just to make sure all of that is set up. Then I'm going to come in here and go finish. I'm going to go ahead and save. And if I do my tool path, I can just cut some time. I can zoom in, and I'm showing 53.25 millimeters. Well, that'll definitely fit on what I need. Right here, it's saying overall 57.2. So that should be fantastic. in my ability to be able to get this milled. So let's go ahead and close. I'm going to go ahead and reload. And now that we're ready here in terms of our programming, let's go to the machine and set this up.